Good morning. Today I want to cover part two of my series titled Summer of Change, June through August of 2025. And in part one, I talked about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and its implications for the future, uh, which could be good, could be bad, depending upon the choices we make. Today I want to talk about something which will probably be a little bit more positive and might even save humanity. So let's see if I can share my screen and we'll get started. This will take a few seconds as I need to get rid of some panels so that I can see what I'm doing. So just bear with me here. Oops. Always takes just a little bit of time. And I think we're here. The Summer of Change, June through August 2025, Part 2. The Uranus-Neptune-Pluto mini-grand trine, which I have titled A New Hope. Okay, over the next 4 years, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, we're going to have this mini-grand trine formed by Uranus sextile Neptune, Neptune sextile Pluto, and Pluto trine Uranus, which will wax and wane in strength over the next 4 years. And I have marked here times when these aspects will be within a 1 degree orb of being exact. And so all three are going to be pretty strong during August, September, October of this year, July, and a little bit of August in 2026, June of 2027, and parts of May in 2028. So this is going to be an ongoing positive influence, which can spur innovation, release a lot of tension in the world. And here I have a table showing when Uranus trine Pluto will be exact. We're going to have 5 exact trines. Similarly, we're going to have 5 exact sextiles of Uranus to Neptune from 2025 into 2027. The trines went on from 2026 into 2028. And then we're going to have a huge number of times between 2026 and 2032 that Neptune will make an exact sextile to Pluto. Having been born very, very close to an exact sextile between Neptune and Pluto, I have Neptune at 19 degrees Libra, Pluto at 19 degrees Leo. I and others around my age with this very strong sextile, we tend to have a more cosmic view of things, a more transcendent outlook. We accept innovations in society much more easily than other people. And so it's very interesting that all of this is happening now. Basically, all of these aspects are going to bring in new perspectives and new ways of looking at things into our consciousness. And the children born during these times, when they come of age, when they reach their 20s, they're going to be making their impact on the world. They're going to carry uh, these influences forward. And so that is really a new hope for humanity. This is going to make it more likely. Well, in part one, I talked about how this particular conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, it's not just something that happens every 35, 36 years roughly. This one is happening at the beginning of Aries. And the last time we had a conjunction in the first degree of Aries was about 6,000 years ago. And the last time it happened was during a period that historians roughly uh, peg as the dawn of human civilization. Writing and hieroglyphics began to emerge around that time, 6,000 years ago, and humans began to record their history. So the question is, are we on the cusp of another great leap forward in human evolution? Or will the upcoming Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the first degree of Aries, is that going to just be the end of the cycle? The fall of humanity, the end of humanity? Well, it could go either way, depending upon the decisions that people make and that leaders make. But this mini grand trine between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto makes it more likely that positive things are going to happen, and that we do indeed take this next evolutionary leap forward for humanity. Now, in addition to the sextiles that Neptune makes to Uranus and Pluto, it's also often been at the midpoint between Uranus and Pluto, which means the creative energy of Uranus, the transformative energy of Pluto gets funneled through the visionary insight of Neptune. And this has actually been going on since 2023. We had several months in 2023, early 2024, when Neptune was within 1 degree of that conjunction with the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And it was also strong later in 2024 and going into 2025. And it continues into 2026, 2027, and really fades out in 2028. So even when those sextiles between Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto aren't that strong, we often have Neptune nonetheless at the midpoint between Uranus and Pluto in the sky. So they've been working together for a while. Now, this mini grand trine will be fairly strong on July 11th of 2025. Some of the things related to Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus and Gemini, and Neptune and Aries are new technologies, humanitarianism, charity, and power to the people. Pluto and Aquarius. And then we have creative inventions and innovations in communication, Uranus and Gemini. And then dreams become reality, individual spirituality, but also maybe conflicts based on ideology. Those are all related to Neptune and Aries. Hopefully, the beneficial sextiles will reduce the tendency of conflict emerging, the tendency or likelihood that conflict will emerge. Okay, but all of this is going to work together in a very well coordinated way to bring about these new perspectives. On July 11th, 2025, the Moon, Saturn, and Venus, which are more personal in nature, they're going to be involved. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens this summer. It's going to foreshadow a lot of things. I talked in part one of this two-part video series on how the close but not exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune all summer long in 2025, June, July, and August, how that is going to perhaps foreshadow and give us a preview of what to expect in 2026 when this conjunction becomes exact. Likewise, the trine between Uranus and Pluto won't become exact for the first time until 2026, but we're getting a foreshadowing, a preview of that in summer of 2025, when this mini grand trine will be particularly strong. And as I say, it's going to bring in a lot of new ideas, a lot of new perspectives. And as I'll talk about later, it harkens back to the 60s. This is a continuation of the 60s when in 1965 and 66 we had Uranus conjunct Pluto. And that brought about all that social revolution in the latter half of the 60s. We've gone through periods where that revolution has flourished, and we have gone through periods when there has been a conservative backlash to it. But now with the trine, it's real once again. The revolution is back, the 60s are back, and we're already in America, and I think in other parts of the world, starting to see some mass protests, like we did back in the 60s. People will begin rejecting some of these conservative trends, and we've seen that recently in elections in Canada and Australia. And as I say, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they're going to bring in these higher perspectives in this more expansive worldview. And it's interesting that on July 11th, 2025, that is also when the new Superman movie premieres in the theaters. And those higher ideals of truth and justice and a cosmic connection, that just resonates so perfectly with this Uranus, Neptune, Pluto mini grand trine. Now, on August 7th of 2025, this mini grand trine, will be even stronger. And it's joined in by a grand trine between Uranus, Mars, and Pluto. And we have, let's see, two other mini grand trines here. We have Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Mercury, and Uranus, Mars, and Mercury. So this is going to be a very harmonious day in many ways. We do have that opposition between Mars and Saturn, Neptune, that could result in some aggression, some conflict in parts of the globe, or accidents, natural disasters, fires. But the fact that the tension is being mitigated by the trines and sextiles to Mars, and also the fact that Mars rules Aries, which Saturn and Neptune are in, that lessens the severity. So I'm not expecting it to necessarily be too bad. Hopefully it won't. Something could always break, but hopefully it won't. Okay, let's take a quick look at the fall 2025 eclipses. If we look at the lunar eclipse on September 7th, 2025, well, what we have here is, let me go back a second. Okay. What we have here is the mini grand trine is still pretty strong. About the only thing to worry about here is Jupiter square Mars. Jupiter expands things. Mars can be aggression or violence, fighting. So, yes, there could be some expansion of conflict in the world, and we don't have any strong uh, tension relieving aspects to Mars to help things out. And Mars is coming into opposition to Chiron and Eris. That could result in wounding and strife. And we'll probably see this being maybe stronger at uh, the solar eclipse. We'll see that maybe well, coming up soon in this presentation. But things don't look too bad here. Uh, it's the eclipse. Eclipses always intensify things, and it's good to have this mini grand trine intensified. Okay, here we are at the solar eclipse on September 21st, and Mars, it has gone past that opposition, but it's a stronger opposition now to Chiron and Eris. But we still have that mini grand trine in play, and we also have Sun and Moon completing a grand trine with Uranus and Pluto. So this is looking overall very favorable. We do have Uranus making a square to Venus, and Venus in Virgo is going to like sort of the rules that are out there. It likes the details, but Uranus wants to break up the existing pattern. So things are going to get um, shaken up a little bit by this eclipse. And then with not only Mars in opposition to Chiron Eris, but also making a square to Pluto. Unfortunately, things could also be a little bit more volatile, a little bit greater chance of wars, conflicts, uh, accidents, natural disasters in the world. But nonetheless, we do have these good aspects that can be very powerful and could be a saving grace for the world in spite of some of the tensions that we see here. I'll also point out that once again, Mars does not have any of those tension reducing aspects being made to it, and neither does Venus. So that makes it more likely that something is going to break. But I have hope. The good aspects are also very strong, even if they're not being made directly to Mars. Okay, if we look at how these eclipses will affect the July 2nd, 1776 chart for the passage of the Declaration of Independence. That's when it was passed by the Continental Congress. That's when the decision to be independent of Britain was actually made. Well, America's got some tensions. We have transiting Chiron and Eris, or square, natal Mercury, Moon, and Pluto. So there could be some ongoing damage to the economy, to commerce, and to the general public, and also to America's power and whoever holds power in America. Obviously, the president, but that could be other people in his administration or oligarchs, financial leaders, Senate leaders, anyone who holds power could be wounded and experience some strife. Mars, transiting Mars, is going to be pretty strongly opposite natal Chiron in the USA chart, and this is going to act as a trigger for some sort of wounding or sorrow around this time. We also have Saturn and Neptune making that square to Venus. I talked about that a lot, I believe, in part one. Venus is our right brain. It's our nonverbal brain. It's our values. It's what we consider good, what we consider bad, what we like, what we don't like. And with these squares, people are not going to be liking things. There's going to be discontent in America. There's going to be misinformation, some zealous beliefs about things, and a feeling of restriction and a feeling of something lacking as a result of the square from Saturn. The good thing is Mars, transiting Mars will be making a pretty strong trine to natal Mars, and that can result in some beneficial actions and creativity and inventiveness since Mars is in Gemini, natal Mars. And with transiting Mars in Libra, maybe we will work out more trade deals with some other countries. I don't want to call them allies because I'm not sure how much they like us anymore. Okay, if we look at the impact of the solar eclipse to this July 2nd, 1776 chart, just more of the same. We still have Chiron and Eris making a square to the natal Mercury and Moon, and we have Saturn and Neptune still making a square to natal Venus. So still some hardship, some wounding, some strife, some discontent going on in July of, I'm sorry, in September of this year. The eclipse is on September 21st. Of course, this eclipse was on September 7th. I might have said July because that's the date for this USA chart. So if I previously said July for when this goes on, sorry, I meant September. So we have things going on with Chiron and Eris right now in May of 2025 as I'm making this video. And it seems like America will get some wounding in the next couple of weeks in the latter part of May as a result of what the tariffs are doing to world trade. And if that's the case, well, all of this may still be there or come back to hurt us in September of 2025. Okay, here we can see a timeline a little bit more clearly. And we've got a lot of stuff going on in 2025. First part of 2026, we have the Neptune square Venus, which causes some discontent, some zealousness, some fanaticism, misinformation. We have Chiron square Mercury and Moon, and those become exact in May of 2025, October of 2025, and March of 2026. So the date for this video is May 8th. And so we haven't quite gotten to May 18th and 20th yet. So as we go through May, I'm keeping an eye on trade and inflation and how the people are feeling because I'm expecting more wounding. But people can make decisions that either make this wounding worse or make it better. So I'm waiting to see what happens. And what happens this May gives us a sense of what to expect later in October and next year in March. And let's see, then following Neptune squaring Venus, we have Saturn squaring Venus on these dates. But then we get into Chiron square Pluto, which will be interesting because this is wounding to America's power. So are we going to be feeling the effects of our economic power being wounded as a result of these tariff policies? Will supply chains be broken? Will we lose our ability to sell to a lot of other countries? Is this going to be a wounding to the president himself or to other leaders or people of power in the country? Don't know for sure, but these are the times when such wounding will be most likely in May of 2026, November 2026, and March of 2027. And then we have Saturn just sort of following up, hitting the same planets that were hit by uh, Chiron here, and Saturn will be making its squares to Mercury, the Moon, and to Pluto. So this will probably be less severe than the ones from Chiron, but it's going to be kind of a mopping up that occurs in 2027 and 2028. Now, if I look at how the lunar and solar eclipses in September of 2025 will affect that July 4th chart, the Sibley chart for America. And if you watched part one of this series, you know that I consider the Sibley chart as representing more of America's persona, its outward appearance, how it likes to see itself, how other countries see us. The July 2nd, 1776 chart, I see as representing to a greater extent America's inner self. The July 2nd chart has Moon in Capricorn, and that represents our tendency to control others, both within the country and outside of the country. We've controlled minorities. We have a shameful history with slavery and with Native Americans. Women were oppressed for quite a while. Couldn't get to vote in America for quite a while. In the 1970s, a woman couldn't even get a credit card unless her husband said it was okay. Of course, we have a long history of trying to control other countries. That is America on the inside, always trying to control things. On the outside, we have Moon and Aquarius, and we like to think of ourselves as humanitarians, highly charitable, spreading freedom and democracy throughout the world, and being the leaders in technology and innovation. And that outward persona is often true also. So, if we now look at how the lunar eclipse affects this July 4th, 1776 Sibley chart, it's going to be very similar to what happens to the July 2nd chart. We don't have the moon involved, but we have transiting Chiron and Eris, squaring Mercury and Pluto, wounding the economy and power structures, America's power. Saturn and Neptune, they're not going to square Venus, but they're going to be conjunct the cusp of the fourth house. So this suggests big structural changes for the homeland and for the American public. And we have, again, transiting Mars opposite natal Chiron. This will act as a trigger, most likely for some sort of violence or wounding, or accidents, or natural disasters, or other energetic processes in play. Okay. Now, regarding the aspects from the September 21st solar eclipse to this July 4th chart, well, again, it just continues what I just said. We still have Chiron and Eris squaring Mercury and Pluto. We still have Saturn and Neptune conjunct the cusp of the fourth house. And here's a timeline for the some of the major aspects in 2025 up through 2028 for this Sagittarius rising chart, the Sibley chart for America. Some things happen a little earlier in this chart, like Chiron square Mercury. Others happen around the same time. Okay. Now, let's take a look at how these eclipses in fall of 2025 will probably impact Trump. Well, he will have Chiron and Eris squaring his natal Venus. Venus rules his 10th house of status. So we could expect his status, his power, to be wounded. And that goes along with, let's see what we had. Let's go back here. I guess Chiron's square Pluto, wounding of power. Okay. And let's see, the transiting lunar nodal axis will be squaring Uranus in Trump's natal chart. This is going to intensify his tendency to create chaos and break up the existing pattern. It could also just make him very manic at this point in time. If he had some sort of bipolar psychotic break, it wouldn't surprise me. What may be more likely is he's just going to be manic on steroids and creating even more chaos. Saving grace, though, is Chiron and Eris will be making a trine to his natal Mars, which is conjunct his ascendant. And this is what often happens. His chart is such that when he has bad aspects to one part of it, the planets involved, the transiting planets often make good aspects to another part, and that throws him a lifeline, which helps him survive the trouble and chaos that he's in, rating and that he's in. Now, the square from the transiting lunar nodes to Uranus, that is actually going to last quite a while, from August through October. So, look for a very manic fall from Trump. Let's see if we look at the September 21st solar eclipse to see how that is going to impact Donald Trump. It's just more the same. We still have Chiron and Eris making a square to natal Venus, but a trine to natal Mars. We still have the lunar nodal axis making that strong square to his natal Uranus in the 10th house. And here's a timeline of some of the aspects that will be made to Trump, to his chart. Now, going back here, I didn't look at aspects like sesquiquadrats. I looked at the primary major aspects, but you can see that in 2025, transiting Pluto will make a sesquiquadrat to Trump's Uranus a long time. So this has been part of the manicness and the chaos that we see, which is either destroying or transforming a lot of structures in America. Chiron square is Saturn and Neptune. That's going to be going on quite a bit throughout 2025 and the first part of 2026. And then as we get into summer of 2025, and continuing through April of 2026, we have Uranus making a sesquiquadrat to his Chiron and a square to his ascendant. Again, he'll likely become increasingly erratic in many ways, and this could cause some wounding to him at the same time. And let's see, Uranus, sesquiquadrat Chiron, that is going to be exact on July 5th. The square to the ascendant is exact on July 6th. And that could be an interesting time for him. Interesting summer for Donald Trump. Okay, I want to look at this Uranus-Pluto trine in a little bit more detail, because things don't happen just in isolation. Aspects are part of a larger cycles, which begin with conjunctions. And Uranus was conjunct Pluto on October 9th, 1965. This was the kickoff for the second half of the 60s, where we had tremendous social revolution. Uranus and Pluto were in Virgo, which likes to pay attention to details and to the rules, and this was breaking all the rules. That's what the latter half of the 60s did. Everything that you thought was a rule in society, it got broken and transformed. We also had at this time a conjunction between Saturn and Chiron in Pisces, and this brought about a spiritual revolution. Chiron, it's not always wounding. It's really an urge to go beyond the visible world to the invisible spiritual realms, this more transcendent, more joyous reality. Saturn is discipline, and with these two coming into conjunction in Pisces, young Americans turn toward spiritual disciplines, primarily related to Eastern philosophy and religion. So we were all doing transcendental meditation, searching for gurus, looking for spiritual disciplines to follow. And this tendency was enhanced by the trine from Neptune to Saturn and Chiron. We had another conjunction between Uranus and Pluto in 1966. It's still in opposition to Saturn and Chiron. Saturn and Chiron are getting close to exact conjunction, and they're still getting this trine from Neptune, which is enhancing the Pisces quality of this conjunction, the tendency toward spirituality and invisible realms. And we had a third conjunction of Uranus and Pluto on June 30th of 1966. It's moved out of orb from opposition to Chiron and Saturn, but these two planets are still conjunct and still being having this tendency toward meditation and spirituality enhanced by the trine from Neptune. Now, this also plays too into the emergence of psychedelics in the 60s and the acceptance of marijuana. People were trying to transcend reality one way or another. Saturn and Neptune was encouraging spiritual disciplines, but Neptune and Scorpio, this is the origin of if it feels good, do it anthem that we had back then. Now, I want to look at this date. Let's see, this would be August 27th, 1966. We had this beautiful grand trine that involved Jupiter and Mars on here, Saturn and Chiron up here, Neptune, and the lunar nodal axis over here. We have Neptune conjunct South Node and Scorpio. And this in particular fueled the rise of psychedelics and the use of marijuana. On the one hand, with Saturn in Pisces conjunct Chiron, people were looking for spiritual disciplines. But the flip side of this is Saturn likes structure. Pisces and Neptune, they weaken structure. So social norms were being weakened at this point. And as I pointed out with Neptune in Scorpio, our motto was, if it feels good, do it. This was all the sensuality of the 60s, the use of transcendent psychedelic drugs, free love, nudity, the pill, everyone having that urge to merge. And with Jupiter in Cancer, we were also seeing an expansion of the definition of family. And people were moving into communes and leaving their blood ties to form new kinds of family with friends and other people they felt close to. Now, what's interesting is we had somewhat of a repeat of that grand trine around July 29th of 2013. It's so interesting. We had Jupiter conjunct Mars again. Jupiter's in Cancer again. The definition of families was being expanded to include LGBTQ people. We had same-sex marriages on the horizon and same-sex couples adopting, having children, and forming families. We had Chiron in Pisces again. This time it's conjunct Neptune. And Saturn, instead of being in Pisces, it's in Scorpio. But the lunar nodal axis is also involved. And with Saturn and Neptune having switched places, well, the emphasis is on spirituality and also psychedelic drugs, again, marijuana. This was a period in which we saw a great push, first toward legalization of medical marijuana, and then legalization of recreational marijuana. But with Saturn in Scorpio, instead of Neptune in Scorpio, no longer were we saying, if it feels good, do it. Instead, we were saying legalization with regulation. Satisfy our desires and our wants, but do it in a way which is regulated. So interesting. This astrological configuration, it's kind of a repeat of what we saw in the 60s. And we saw the same issues come up, with the difference that now the emphasis was on regulation, appropriate regulation, rather than unbridled hedonism. Okay, now everything began with that Uranus-Pluto conjunction in the 60s. That's the starting of a very important synodic cycle. In the mid-90s, we reach the first major milestone. Uranus and Pluto come into a sextile. And notice Uranus is at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Same point where in 2020 we had that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. And then I think it was in 2023 that Pluto first dipped back into Aquarius, and it's been a few months entirely at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So, with Pluto making a sextile to Uranus, this first waxing sextile, and with Uranus at 0 degrees Aquarius, we began to see the development of new technologies. This is basically the time period when the internet and the World Wide Web really went public. The internet had become public a few years earlier, but wasn't easy to navigate. the World Wide Web came along, and suddenly it was very easy, and everyone wanted to get online. And this was the beginning of the dot-com revolution. Of course, we had the dot-com crash at the end of the century. Okay, we get another exact sextile between Uranus and Pluto. And let's see, August 7th, 1995. Uranus is now back in Capricorn. The structure is being developed. New companies are emerging like Amazon. For the first several years, these companies lose money, but investors saw the promise, and so they kept with it, and that promise was realized. And then we had Uranus sextile Pluto again on March 8th, 1996. Uranus is back in Aquarius. We have another sextile, September 20th, 1996. And this time Uranus has gotten back to 0 degrees of Aquarius. This is a highly charged point for the world at this time. We had another sextile on February 5th, 1997 between Uranus and Pluto. And that was the last one. So let me go back a second here. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these sextiles occurring in the latter half of the 90s. And this was a time when we were getting not only innovation and technology, thanks to the influence of Aquarius here, but this was also a time for liberalism. Bill Clinton was president. Things were looking very good economically. He ended his second term with a huge budget surplus that got squandered later on a war in Iraq by George W. Bush. But this was a very liberal period. Things were looking good. It looked like we were on the verge of realizing the liberal progressive promise of the second half of the 1960s. But then things changed. 2012 through 2015, we began to experience the waxing square between Uranus and Pluto. And this is when we really began to get this strong conservative backlash. It had been building for a while. There was certainly a conservative backlash against the successful progressivism of Bill Clinton in the latter half of the 90s that was started by Newt Gingrich. But here with Barack Obama as president and the Affordable Care Act having been passed, conservatives really rallied, and we got this very, very strong conservative backlash during the second Obama presidency. And that is what the square between Uranus and Pluto represents. It's a relationship. When you get to that waxing square, it's like, wait a minute, is this really what I want to do? And so there's the strong rise of conservatism against the social progress that was being made. And it all reached a peak, I think, when Donald Trump descended that escalator at Trump Tower in New York City to announce his presidential candidacy on June 16th of 2015. Okay, so that's where Trump came from Uranus square Pluto. But now we're going to be getting into a series of beneficial trines of Uranus to Pluto. And with all of these, Neptune is going to be involved. It's going to be completing that mini grand trine. So this is some very beneficial stuff which is happening in the second half of this current decade, the 2020s. And I've talked already quite a bit about the meaning of Uranus trine Pluto, but we get a foreshadowing of it this summer when it will be within 1 degree orb for most of the summer. That gives us a preview, but becomes exact on 7/17/2026. And just a few days after that, we have what the late great mundane astrologer Andre Barbeau felt was going to be the most harmonious day of the century. And look at how strong these harmonious aspects are. We've got Pluto at 4 degrees, Neptune 4 degrees, Uranus 4 degrees, Jupiter at 4 degrees, sextile, 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 trine, trine. And then we have Chiron 0 degrees, South Node 0 degrees, Moon 0 degrees, North Node 0 degrees, creating this mystic rectangle, as we call it. So the summer of 2026, that has some very powerful harmonious aspects. We get foreshadowing of it this summer, as well as foreshadowing of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So pay attention to what happens in June, July, and August of this summer. Now, let's go back here. This most harmonious day of the century, it's somewhat reminiscent of this period between 577, 574 BCE before the Common Era, when we had a series of outer planet conjunctions between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And these conjunctions were followed basically by the birth of Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, golden age of Greek philosophy, the writing of many of the Upanishads, and the writing of the Torah during the Babylonian exile for the Israelites. So this was a very, very transformative time in the history of the world. Likewise, this could be the start of a very, very transformative time for humanity. Okay. Now, here I finally list a little bit more of the things we might anticipate from Uranus trine Pluto and also Neptune in Aries. And these are some things predicted by artificial intelligence. I went to Microsoft's Copilot and asked about some what advances in technology we might expect in 2026. And it talked a lot about advances in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 6G connectivity, augmented reality, sustainable technology, battery innovations for electric cars, for instance, all related to Pluto and Aquarius. Related to Uranus and Gemini, innovations in communication, and inventiveness on steroids. Gemini likes to think it's curious about things. It invents things. And with Neptune and Aries, visions become reality. With Neptune at the midpoint between Uranus and Pluto, all of this inventiveness, all of this technology gets funneled through this vision. And since these planets are in Aries here, we turn the vision into a reality. It's the birth of something new. Now, it's already kind of easy to see that the emergence of artificial technology, now that we know how to do it, people are out there looking for all sorts of applications of artificial technology. artificial intelligence, rather. And when this gets coupled with quantum computing, which will allow us to computers to think harder and deeper, wow, it's the ways in which this might alter life on Earth as we go into the future. We can't even begin to imagine all the ways in which it might alter things. This would probably be bigger than the emergence of the internet, the global internet, the World Wide Web in the latter half of the 1990s, which brought this global connectivity to the world. This will probably be an even bigger advance. Just this one thing, artificial intelligence, as it becomes merged with quantum computing, as more and more applications are brought online for artificial intelligence, it's beyond our vision to understand just how much this can and probably will change the world. But it'll probably be quite a bit. Okay, so we're moving into this really incredible future. Seems like there's one other thing I want to say about this. Let me just think for a second here to see if I can bring it back to mind. Oh, yes. Question. Are we going to be moving into just this wonderful utopia? Well, in some ways, yes. We're not only getting back, getting all of this tremendous leap forward in technology, but remember this mini grand trine between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. It also represents these higher perspectives, these more transcendent viewpoints about things. That could lead to a utopian society. This is the first waxing trine since the conjunction in the 1960s. So just as the waxing sextile brought us to this period of progressivism and liberalism, the waxing trine can do so even more. So yes, this could lead us into some kind of utopia, particularly if we're very lucky. But it may be a greater chance that we just wind up with a future like that predicted in the classic cult movie Blade Runner. We go into a future where there is all these technological marvels, but at the same time, it's very dark and gritty and imperfect in a lot of other ways. We don't get rid of all of society's ills. So I think somewhere between Blade Runner and a true utopia, that may be where we land if we can avoid wars which take us back to the Stone Age. In part one of this series, I talked about the winds of war, the drums of war, and how both America and Russia could have some conflicts coming up in the next few years, which we hope to avoid armed conflict. We always hope that we're now advanced enough to do that, but it could happen. To the extent that occurs, it could be bad for the rest of the world. But this is a lifeline. This mini grand trine, the trines between Pluto and Uranus, those are lifelines, which will help alleviate a lot of the tension and hopefully bring us into a better future. So let's focus on that. Let's pray for that. Let's have vision. Let's transcend. Let's begin that next evolutionary leap for humanity and not the end of our cycle. Okay. Uranus trine Pluto again on June 15th, 2027. Again, you can see that mini grand trine is still going strong. And likewise on January 12th of 2028 and on May 9th of 2028. We not only have, again, the exact trine, but the mini grand trine still very strong. And here are just some graphics showing when that trine between Uranus and Pluto will be exact. And I believe this is the last slide. This is a view of some of the Barbo planetary cycle index for the 21st century. Now, what is that index? Well, it's just a cumulative sum of the distances between the outer planets Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. When the planets are close to one another, the sum of the distances that each pair is apart from one another, that gets small. And that creates an imbalance. That means we have a lot of outer planets that are close together to one another. That creates an imbalance, which makes it more likely that things like pandemics and wars will happen. And as we moved into 2020, we were getting close to the absolute low of this index for the century. Consequently, 10 years before it began, the late great mundane astrologer Andre Barbeau had predicted the likelihood of a pandemic and maybe even some wars. And of course, this is when the COVID pandemic began. We hit absolute bottom for this index in March of 2022, and that was just a few weeks after Putin and Russia invaded Ukraine and caused a lot of global chaos. The good news is that the Barbo Planetary Cycle Index is on the rise. We're about here right now, and as we go throughout this century, the cumulative distances between the outer planets, it starts to overall get larger. Things get more spread out. That creates more balance in the world. So there is hope from the Barbo Planetary Cycle Index, from the Uranus-Pluto trines, from the Uranus-Neptune-Pluto mini-grand trine. There is hope for a positive outcome following this decade. There is hope that we will get past some of the current problems in the world and past some of the problems that we see coming up for both America and Russia. There is hope that we will avoid war and economic collapse. And there is hope for not the end of humanity as we end that 6,000 year cycle, 6,000 years it takes for Saturn and Uranus, Neptune to go from one conjunction at the beginning of Aries to the next conjunction at the beginning of Aries. There is hope that instead of that representing the end of humanity's cycle, that it will instead represent the beginning of the next evolutionary leap for humanity. And I certainly hope that is the case. But all depends upon the decisions that people make. Free will is the one factor that we can't control and that we can't predict. But things are looking a little brighter. Okay, that is going to be the end of this slideshow. So I'll stop sharing, and I'm back. And I hope that tells you a lot about what's coming ahead for the rest of this decade for America, Russia, and the world. I hope parts 1 and part 2 of this video are very informative for you. And like I say, there are challenges coming up. There are big changes coming up. Even if Saturn and Neptune wasn't happening at the start of Aries on the world axis, beginning another 6,000 year or so cycle, it would still be a big deal. We tend to have big social changes occurring whenever Saturn and Neptune are conjunct. This one's going to be even bigger. The potential successes and the potential hazards are greater. But we also have that Uranus trine Pluto, the Uranus Neptune Pluto, mini grand trine throwing us a lifeline. So along with the great risks that await us, there's also great promise. But whichever way the dominoes fall, that depends upon us and the people in power. But the people not in power, we can influence those in power, just as we did in August 17th, 1987, with the harmonic convergence, where global meditations within a few months completely turned around the tense relationship between the United States and Russia. So that is the part you can play. Open yourself up to these higher perspectives, these higher energies that are coming into the planet. Take a more global perspective, a more progressive look at things. Meditate and visualize world joy and world peace and world oneness. This is a time when that dream can become a reality. So ponder those things and don't just pray for the best, but work for the best and visualize the best. And let us all hope that a better world is around the corner and that we can get past some of the problems, some of the wounding, and some of the conflicts that will be coming. So I'll let you ponder those things, think about those things, and I hope you enjoyed this series. And so I'll end as usual by just saying, so long and be well.